You are listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I'm Kyle Bryant.
And I'm Sean Baumstark. Together, we're navigating life with disability.
Sean and I were both diagnosed with a rare, debilitating, life-shortening disease that has affected our physical abilities and causes us to live with urgency. We are constantly looking for the next challenge, not only in spite of our disease, but because of it.
We are two dudes who constantly challenge our own abilities, and we invite you to do the same. Hey, what's up? Here we are again, Two Disabled Dudes podcast. How's it going, Kyle?
Dude, it's going really good. I'm stoked to be here.
Why? Why are you stoked?
I don't know. It's just fun to sit here and record stuff.
And talk with me?
I don't know.
Thank you.
It's not what I was going to say.
That's fine. I said it for you.
So I've been really trying to get up early and ride my stationary trainer inside because it's freaking freezing outdoors right now.
Nice.
So I've been trying to get up at like 6:30 and I'll ride for half an hour because that's about all I can take on the trainer.
Yeah, it's gonna get boring really fast.
Yeah, it does get really boring. I had a super pole installed right by my trainer so I can get in and out of my trek. And if anyone wants to know what a super pole is, it's easy to just Google it. You'll see it's just a pole.
Thank you for that.
But also I've been trying to, I've heard, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately, and I've run across several guests on podcasts that talk about the power of meditation. And so there's this app called Headspace, and the first thing it has on it is a series of 10 guided meditations that are just 10 minutes long. So I'll sit on my trainer, I'll do a half an hour on the trainer, and then put on Headspace for like 10 minutes and kind of try to meditate. I'm obviously not very good at it yet, and I'm not sure exactly what it's doing yet, but I'm enjoying trying to quiet my mind for a few minutes before I start my day.
John Maxwell, he actually refers to something like that, meditation or whatever your process might be, as a form of reflection. And whether you're reflecting on your day or an activity or your week, it gives you time to actually learn from the experience. And he talks about how experience isn't necessarily the greatest teacher. It's your reflection on that experience and your takeaway from the experiences that become the greatest teachers. Excuse me.
I like that a lot. It's that thing where you're like in the shower and your mind is just wandering, and then you have that epiphany, right?
Sure.
And it's all about the reflection, no matter how you get it. And so maybe if we can be intentional about it, like we can maybe have epiphanies a little more often. Or maybe we just need to take longer showers. I don't know.
That could, especially when it's this cold out.
Yeah.
You're challenging me a little bit because, you said waking up early and riding your bike more and meditating and all these different really things that sound like great New Year's resolutions. And I'm sitting over here thinking about all the New Year's resolutions I'm going to begin to implement sometime.
Sean, what's
in my
the
life.
date? What's the date right now? Could you remind me? It's
toward the end of January, okay? But I don't like to jump on things too fast. You gotta let the buzz wear off.
Sean likes to pre-reflect instead of wait for it to happen and then reflect. It's valuable to pre-reflect.
You gotta prepare. Anyway, we're gonna move along before I start really feeling bad about my wasted 3 weeks of January. Kyle and I, we had a lot of fun. Last episode, we were talking about travel and mobility and had a good time doing so. And, well, as soon as it went to post, we started getting some comments on the website. We got a few questions via Facebook or the website and a couple of emails. So we thought it might actually be a little fun to answer some of those questions, comment back on those inquiries, and even tell some stories about ourselves and our own experiences. So that's what we're going to do today. We're calling this episode Travel Gone Wild.
And why did we name it that? Because all of these stories revolve around travel, and it's pretty wild, or what?
Yeah, and I was trying to act younger than we really are. Try to be a little college partier, kind of.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
I don't know.
All right, we'll take on that theme. So, Sean, I wanted to thank everybody for the comments and questions they posted on our blog and on Facebook and all that.
So yes, everybody, thank you.
So yeah, we wanted to thank you, and partly we wanted to thank you because it's becoming clear to us that we're gonna start getting bored just talking to each other, and so we need you to insert your comments and your stories and questions and stuff so that me and Sean don't feel like reaching through the computer and strangling each other.
I think it's a good point, Kyle. I mean, you're cool and all, but you're right. These weekly little phone calls they're just wearing me out, bro.
Hey man, I apologize for that. I never wanted to cause you any pain.
Sure. Okay. Well, now I just feel like a jerk. Let's move on. This is what I've been looking forward to the most here, Kyle. Right here. One of the other things we talked about in the last episode, and I was shocked to hear that you haven't checked it out, but we talked about how much you travel and all the joy and experience and anticipation you have when you're going through TSA security and the excitement you get when they, have to search you and stuff. And well, I was shocked, bro. I know you travel so much. You live on the East Coast now, but your family is all here on the West Coast. And with all the travel you do, you've never explored the TSA pre-check option that almost anybody can get by just paying a little bit of money and going through an interview style, I think, kind of process. And last time we mentioned, I think it's about $85 and it covers you for many years. And I was just shocked. And since then, you and I have talked, you travel 90 days on average out of the year, which is about a quarter of the year. It's about a week out of every month or a little more. I mean, that's a whole lot of travel. And you've been doing that for, what, I guess almost 8 years now?
Yeah, a little less than 8 years. But, Sean, I'm really excited to announce that I went in and got my TSA pre-check done this week.
Wait, you got it done or you started the process?
Well, I have to wait a week for it to arrive to actually get the little number, but I went in and I was kicking myself because it was seriously like a 3-minute appointment.
Oh, my
I went
gosh.
in there, I gave her my passport, I put my hand on the little scanner, it scanned my fingerprints, And then she's like, all right, you'll get your number in a week. See ya.
No, it was that easy.
And I'm like, I waited 8 years to do this. What?
Do you mind telling us how much that cost?
It was $85 for 5 years.
My gosh.
So, yeah.
So it's $85. How long is it good for?
For 5 years. So, I mean, if you break it down by every time you go to the airport, for me, it's going to be like 50 cents or something per trip to the airport, or maybe less than that. But
and if it were an option, I'm sure everybody would just pay an extra 50 cents to skip the line.
Yeah,
or
like
not
here,
take
just
their
put your
shoes off.
2 quarters in here and you can, oh my gosh, yeah. So
That's insane. Another thing I want to point out here, Kyle, as much as I love you and I know you like to take initiative every once in a while, this appointment, now, from what I understand, you didn't actually make the appointment, did you? Tell us a little bit about how that came up.
it was, in fact, a friend who heard the last episode, and she was like, "This is ridiculous."
As I was,
she heard it, and that day she knew all my information, so she like made an appointment and was like, "Here, just go do it." I'm like, "Oh, all right."
That's insane. Well, thank you, friend. I was worried that next time I see you, which is probably only a month or so away, that I would have to punch you in the face, which you gave me permission to do.
Sweet. I avoided a punch in the face. I'm pretty stoked about that.
Well, good job. Hey, to keep it moving right along, another thing we talked about in the last episode was this story of a fellow FA'er who had traveled for the first time by herself. She had taken a flight for a work event. Well, anyway, that individual, her name is Christina, and she wrote a beautiful, 1 page or so blog explaining and talking about that experience. And in it, she really talks about flying alone and then experiencing a city kind of by herself, but also with some new coworkers that she was still getting comfortable around. And so we want you to check out that story. It's available on the website, and it's really kind of a neat thing where she talks about the apprehension, the anxiety of flying alone, given FA, and then really how grateful she is that she took on that challenge. She went on the trip and talks about how she's looking forward to more. And one of the things that I took away from reading this story was about how much permission she gave herself to put her needs in terms of safety first. She wasn't being selfish in terms of where they went for dinner and how she slept and where she slept and what kind of Ubers they drove. But really, she was putting her safety needs first and leaning on people for help or making arrangements to just make sure she stayed safe. So it's really kind of a neat part of the story that you can read on our website.
Yeah, I like that. And the part that I really liked about Christina's story was, how she discovered what a supportive community she has at her job. And, I commend them for that. But I also think that it's something that we can all look at and understand that people just want to help, and sometimes it's our responsibility to allow that to happen, and sometimes we'll be amazed at what happens when we allow that and see the neat community that forms around us when we allow it to happen.
Absolutely. So, Christina, thank you for that story. Again, you can find it on the website, the same feed as all of our audio episodes.
Another listener we heard from was Mary. She submitted her comment on the comment form on our website, and we really appreciate that, Mary. Last episode, I talked about using the aisle chair to get on the airplane. And Mary was like, well, what if you have to go to the bathroom? How does that work? And
during
the flight. Thank you. And I have to admit that I don't have a lot of experience with this, but what I understand from talking to other people is that every plane, I'm pretty sure every plane is required to have an aisle chair on the flight in the air. I don't know that. I bet that doesn't happen every time, so it's worth double checking and making sure that happens. But my impression is that, if there's an aisle chair on board, you just push your little flight attendant call button and say, hey, I need to use the restroom. They bring the aisle chair, you transfer in, and they help you down to the bathroom. My one question, and this is a question out to all the listeners out there, if anyone has experience with this, and if I'm totally wrong, I could be wrong about all this stuff. So the one thing that I think might be a little bit awkward is actually getting into the restroom, like transferring from the aisle chair onto the toilet or whatever, and it might be helpful to have a travel companion with you to help with that transition. And also, it's not a big space; it's tiny. So if anyone has any feedback on how that works, that would be awesome. But I think that's generally how it happens. And I think that's a good topic for us to, a good practical thing to try to figure out, because I think it's important to be practical. I mean, there's so much, a lot of this is about, getting over our fears and stuff. And I think part of that is figuring out all the little details that make it happen, because it's important. If you can have a game plan going in, I think that helps battle apprehension from all these things that could happen.
So, Kyle, you began that feedback with saying that you don't have personal experience, and I know you fly cross country, which can be 5 or 6 hour flights. How do you avoid the need to get up and use the restroom? What are some of the steps you take to make sure you can hold it until you land?
Yeah, well, if especially flying cross country, like from Philadelphia to Sacramento, that's a whole day. Like, that eats up my whole day. So my whole day is focused on just that flight, right? So I get up and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be on a plane in, 2.5 hours. So I better drink something right now so that I pee right before I get on the plane, right? And for me, the reason I don't have a lot of experience with it is I plan to not get up at all on the plane, which I understand that's not an option for everyone. I mean, I think I've really trained my bladder pretty good, especially from cycling, to really just hold it when it comes down to it. But I try to plan ahead, and I usually sit on the window, so I'll drain my bladder before I get on, and then I'll sit on the window so I don't have to get up at all during the flight. So that's what I do. So we got one other comment from Luz, Luz. She left a comment on the website, and she had some really great stuff to say about traveling, but one thing she mentioned was hailing cabs, and that it's not exactly simple. And that triggered a thought for me. I traveled with a friend in China. And just culturally, disability is not accepted as much. I think we're really fortunate here in the U.S. that there's a consciousness of a lot of different abilities and different needs that people have. And, I found in China it's much different just culturally. And so me and my friend would try and hail a cab, and nobody would stop. We'd seriously be on the street, on the curb for like half an hour, and all these empty cabs would go by, and they wouldn't stop. So finally, I was like, all right, maybe nobody wants to deal with the wheelchair. And so I would like go and hide in like under the eaves, like near the building. My friend would go hail a cab, and as soon as the cab stops, I like ambush out of the side.
Oh,
like,
here I am. Me too.
Yeah, don't forget me. And so, it was helpful to have him there, because we would take my chair apart, and it would be totally fine. But cabbies would just see that and be like, "Oh, I don't want to deal with that,"
Wow.
And so there's one time we were on the curb trying to get a cab for like half an hour, right? And this guy it was like a motorcycle front with like two wheels in the back where you could sit like two people. So it was kind of like a pedicab, but there was an actual motor on the front of it, right? And so he saw us struggling to get a cab, and he's like, "Hey, I'll give you guys a ride. Like, where do you want to go?" So we get in, we're in the back, and there's no trunk, there's no place for anything to fit, right? So we're holding the wheelchair like on our laps in the back of this thing, and going to dinner. I have a sweet selfie, and maybe I'll post that if I can find it. But
oh, sweet.
So that experience has also happened, like even in New York City. Sometimes it's hard to get a cab. So actually, this is another time when we're gonna endorse Uber. I recommend Uber in those situations. But this was before Uber, and especially in Shanghai, where we were, there was no Uber at that time.
Speaking of Uber, Kyle, I recently downloaded and tried the Uber Eats app.
Oh, nice.
I love it.
Sweet. Is it?
I don't use it at home, but I was traveling, and it was late, and I didn't want to go anywhere in an Uber. So instead, I had Uber deliver me some food at like midnight. It worked out perfect. I love it. So yeah, like I said, another
plug for Uber.
Yeah, another plug for Uber and Uber Eats.
Yeah, I've used it too. It's super awesome. I got a burrito at like 3 a.m. when I was super hungry.
Awesome. I was just thinking, in our last episode, you talked about how sometimes it's easier for you because you're in a chair. And so it's obvious that you're up against something that is causing challenge for you.
Yep.
And we talked about me, if I'm traveling, it's often I roll out of bed and I go straight to the airport with a hat and a hoodie, and I'm just as comfortable as I can be. And I'm basically, what I'm saying is I'm a hot mess when I go to the airport.
Yeah,
or Amtrak. Go ahead.
Well,
you're gonna say I was a hot mess at all times, huh? I know where you're going with that. Anyway, so it's been my experience in the past where I believe it's super easy for people to look at me and be like, "Wait, what? Why is he in the handicap spot? Why is he this, that, and the other?" Anyway, a story comes to mind for me, and I think we may have alluded to it last time. We talked about pre-boarding on your airplane, especially with Southwest. And as much as I love Southwest, this particular incident was not a positive one. But I recognize that it's because of the individual, not the company itself. So anyway, I was flying to LA out of Sacramento, and I went to the airport. It was an early morning flight, like first flight out, 6 a.m. or something like that. And I go to the counter, and I'm checking in and also requesting a pre-board pass. And this ticket agent, or whatever you call them, she was like, oh, okay. And she's typing away, and then eventually she looks up at me and she's like, do you need assistance to the airplane? And I say no. She's like, okay. And then she asks, do you need a specific seat? And I'm like, no. And I kid you not, Kyle, her entire face, her tone, everything about her changed to a likelihood or a personhood of Lucifer. And she looks at me and says, with a little, crunch in her eyes, okay, so you want a pre-board pass, but you don't need a specific seat, and you don't need help to the airplane. And the tone was from this place of, okay, you're lying to me. What do you mean you need a pre-board pass if you don't need one of those things? And I'm like, wow. In my head, I'm like, I've never had this kind of response. I've never had issue. And I just look back at her and I say, well, I'm disabled, and there's some issues that come along with the anxiety of everybody pushing onto the plane. So for that reason, I'm asking for a pre-board pass, and I've always done so right here, and I've never had this sort of response. And I tell her that. And she goes, well, I got a job to do, and I'm just asking my questions, blah, 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 blah. And so, because my car was parked in a regular spot, I sometimes, if I can park it in a normal general parking place, I will travel with my car, mirror hanging disabled placard thing. And so I began to pull that out, and she's like, basically, it's like, well, that doesn't prove anything.
Oh, man.
Who are you?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm getting tense now in my face,
Right.
and I know she can feel it. And I'm like, listen, I don't know what you're driving at, but I have never had this sort of pushback from Southwest Airlines. And as far as I know, all I have to do is request a pre-board pass, and it's your duty to give me one. So whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better, just as long as I walk away with the pre-board pass, what do you want to hear from me? And I'm like, I'm mad.
So how did that go over with her?
So here's, basically I got to the point where I'm just staring at her in the face, and I'm like, okay, sure, yes, fine, yes, okay, thank you. And she's like, well, I'm just doing my job, and I got to ask these questions, and you have to answer yes to one of them. I'm like, fine, yes to all of them. So she's like, all right, I'll give you a pre-board pass today, but in the future, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. So the reason why I'm telling this story, and the reason why it sticks in my head, is not because of that particular part, but because I take my ticket, and I go up the escalator, and I get on the little tram to go out to the gates. And while I'm on the tram, I think to myself, ooh, I wonder if I was lucky to get TSA pre-check. Because, like you said, Kyle, sometimes it happens randomly. So I'm on the tram, and I look at my ticket. I'm not TSA pre-check. But I realize in that moment that I do not have a pre-board pass. So after our entire monologue or dialogue back and forth, and after she made a point to let me know that, I was breaking the rules or whatever, and I made it a point to let her know she was breaking the rules. She failed to give me a pre-board pass.
The rules of decency.
Right? So I get off the tram, and I notice there is nobody in line at security. And I think to myself, this is where there's a big difference between me and a lot of other people. I think to myself, there are two ways I can handle this. I can either not care and just go get on my flight and be done with it, or I can give some feedback. And then there are two ways I can give feedback. I can either call and sit on hold forever, or because there's nobody in line at security and I've still got a little bit of time before my flight starts boarding, I can tram my skinny little butt back to the ticket agent or ticket counter and basically call her out. And so I chose to go back to the ticket counter and engage in a very unfriendly conversation with her.
So you're
and
that
her
guy
supervisor.
that like, I go to the airport and I'm like, what's up with that guy? Why is he so pissed?
100%, I am that guy. If, like you said, somebody fails to offer basic human decency, there was nothing. I wasn't in the wrong.
Right.
I simply made my request, and she made it known that she didn't believe that I needed or that I was eligible for a pre-board pass. And I'm definitely that guy. If I see something wrong or if I'm treated wrong, I can't let it go.
Yeah.
I won't.
Yeah.
I choose not to let it go. Anyway, I'm getting mad just reliving the experience. Part of the reason why it was a big deal to me, and the reason why I wanted to address it right away, is actually in this particular case, I was taking the same exact flight the very next day. So this particular day, I was flying to LA and flying right back. And then the very next day, I was flying back to LA and staying a couple nights before I returning home. So knowing I was on the same exact flight schedule, same exact time and everything, I was afraid that I would come back the very next morning and encounter Dana again.
Yeah.
And Dana was her name. I'm not making that up. I will never forget Dana.
So have you seen her at the airport again?
You know, funny story. Every time I fly Southwest out of Sacramento, I go to the ticket counter in hopes of finding her. But I've never seen her again.
So, Sean, what's the moral of this story? What can we learn from your experience? Because, one of the things that we hope to get out of this podcast is learning from terrible experiences,
I don't think there is a point. No, I think it's good for, listeners out there who aren't disabled to realize that everything isn't always as it seems. You can't judge a book by its cover. You don't know what that person is up against. And I used to do this all the time. I'd see a car park in the handicap spot with the placard, and then somebody get out of the car and they appear to be just fine. Well, I've since learned that appearance isn't everything. So I would encourage those listeners to be careful with your perspective, and then also encourage people like me, who, like I mentioned last time, have a short temper, to be a little gracious and to help people understand. I definitely was not in a place of helping her understand. I got defensive really fast.
Yeah, I think that's easy to do. And I know what nobody blames me for that either, because I think also, one of the things to realize is that it's a difficult situation from both ends too. Like she mentioned, she was just trying to do her job. That does not excuse any of what happened. But, just a recognition that it's difficult from both ends is one of the things that comes to mind.
I think I should probably say, for the sake of Southwest, not that my little story is going to put them out of business, I did call the customer service line later that day, and explained to them my grievances, and the person on the other phone, or the other end of the phone, was incredibly gracious, very understanding, and went above and beyond to recover my business. So from that respect, I still love Southwest, and I still choose to fly them. And like I said at the very beginning, this particular individual just was not in a healthy place that morning.
So, Sean, I think in the sort of moral of the story, you talked about, having basically a invisible disability, right? And I remember you telling me a story sort of about that, about actually parking in the accessible parking spot at Starbucks, and an encounter with another customer. So what was that like?
So this happened a couple of years ago after I first got my disability placard. I don't use it all the time. I basically use it when there are no other options, because I still believe in walking, and I can still do that pretty decently. So one day I was rushing to work, and this particular Starbucks I stopped to has a very small parking lot, and the only place available was the disability or the disabled parking spot. And because I now have a placard, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and use it right now for 5 minutes while I get my drink. So I park, I hang my placard, I run in and get a drink, and then as I'm coming back to the car, another customer who I had recognized as being somebody there all the time. We didn't know each other, but we definitely recognize each other because we're there often. He's kind of, I felt like he was bolting toward me. And as I turned around to get in my car, he's got this look on his face, and he's like, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" And I immediately get to that defensive place where I'm like, who the F are you? Like, what's it matter? And in my head, I'm going there, but I don't respond with that. I'm like, well, I have this neuromuscular condition, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was a very brief sentence. And he was like, "Oh no, well, I mean, I've seen you come here all the time for the last couple of years, and I've never noticed anything wrong with you, and I've never seen you park here. Now all of a sudden you have this spot, and I'm concerned. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do?" And it seemed like he was really coming from a sincere, genuine place of, a little bit of curiosity, but also a lot of concern. And it just helped me realize that not everybody that asks that question, what's wrong with you, is coming from a place of judgment or curiosity, but more of a place of concern. And in that brief exchange, this gentleman is probably 40 years older than me. But it was just a good lesson for me to realize and to see that even though his question may have been phrased a little funny, he had no bad intentions. So I certainly appreciated the lesson I learned there.
Yeah, I like that. Like, I feel like it's a good example of community. Like, I feel like, especially at a Starbucks or something, you go in with your head down, you get your drink, and you leave, but this guy was like, "I've seen you around, like, I'm interested in what's going on, and I'm concerned about you because you're part of my community, like, you go to my Starbucks."
Good point.
Yeah, so
that's true.
I like that.
We had never talked before then. And of course, since then, we talk every time we see each other. He's a super nice guy. Well, what about you, Kyle? Are there any stories that stick out? I know you talked about China and hailing a cab, but
another time I was traveling in Ghana with my girlfriend at the time, and we had been, I was traveling in Ghana for like 3 weeks, and Ghana, Africa, and so there's these little buses that take you from town to town, and they're called trotros. And it's like it's not as big as a full-on bus, but it's not as small as like a 9-passenger van or whatever. And in these trochos, like, it's so packed. There are seats that fold down in the aisles, so every seat is full, like, all the way across. I think there were goats strapped to the top of this trocho.
Wow.
And so, you know, it's just a totally full experience. And so we're driving down the road, and one of the roads that was freshly paved, and one of the few. And so we're going like 70 miles an hour down this road, and all of a sudden the back of the van just drops, and we start skidding out of control and slowing down. And so we're like going in the wrong direction in the opposite lane of, luckily there's no traffic, but like we're in the opposite lane. So finally the driver pulls it over to the side. Everybody piles out of the van and finds that the wheel had fallen off of our trocho. So
oh my gosh.
Everybody's out, and the guys that were operating the bus, they go back and they find the wheel, and they find 3 of the 5 bolts that were holding the wheel on. They jack it up and they put the wheel back on with 3 bolts or nuts or whatever they are, and we get back on and like go on our way. And we're going to meet this group of people, and we get there, and nobody even recognized the fact that we were 2 hours late. Like, it didn't matter at all. And that's what I've found in Ghana a lot, is that, like, seriously, it seemed like you could be like 2 days late, and people would just be like, "Hey, good to see you. What's going on? Let's catch up." And, you know, so it was insane, because like, I'm just freaking out, just going, "Oh my gosh, the wheel literally is falling off of our bus." And like, no one's really concerned. They just get the wheel, put it back on, and we keep going. And that's
amazing.
You know, I think it's just a total cultural difference. We're, you know, just go, and super high stress, and everything must go according to plan. And you can't argue with the fact that there's like, whatever, like, let's just keep going from where we're at right now. It like, literally, it's in the past. It does not matter, and you're here now, and let's do what we need to do. So,
you know, it's crazy with that one. That would never happen. In terms of just put it back together and keep going, that would never happen here.
Yeah.
If something breaks on, like, they're parked. They're on the side of the road, and you gotta wait till the new plane gets here, or the new bus, or the new taxi. And it's not an option to waive your safety and say, "Yeah, I don't care. Let's just keep going."
I mean, for the rest of the time we were traveling, whenever we got in a trocho, I'm just like, I wonder how many bolts are on the wheel of this trocho. Like,
That's funny.
I didn't actively inspect, but I definitely had that thought every time I got in a trocho after that.
That's amazing. You know, I think that's a great point. Of there are really 2 ways you can face life, and that reminds me of a quote from Jim Rohn, who is a self-development expert. He wrote, "There are 2 ways to face the future. One is with apprehension, and the other is with anticipation." And with the story you just talked about, you can be apprehensive and sit on the side of the road and wait for another bus, or you can put it back together and anticipate a safe arrival and moving on with life. And I think that's true and indicative of a lot of different things. If you go through life with this reservation of fear and apprehension, you're probably going to either move at a much slower pace or you're not going to move at all. And I'm encouraged by that quote because, no matter what you're up against, there's still things to anticipate, good and positive and exciting. No matter what it is you're facing, there's good can come of it. So having that mentality and that perspective of still anticipating great things is definitely the way of life that I've adopted myself, for sure.
Awesome. And I wanted to throw a quote in there as well as we close out this episode. And the quote I have is from Helen Keller. And I'm sure everyone has heard this quote before, a lot of people. But the quote is, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And, we can either sit around and think about all the things that could go wrong, or we could always go and just get on with it and do the adventure. And so I really like that quote from Helen Keller, and we both encourage everyone to travel more and to always go and experience everything that this life has to offer.
Absolutely. Like you said, Kyle, just roll with it. See what happens. Anticipate great things and enjoy the adventure as you go.
Yep.
That's a great quote.
Awesome, man. Well, I love that. And with that, we will close out this episode. So thanks for joining me for this conversation, Sean. And of course, thank you to all the listeners who provided feedback. And we want to encourage that on an ongoing basis. And we'd like to feature feedback on the show each episode. So keep it coming. Thank you.
We did launch a Facebook page. Please be sure to find us, like us, and follow us there. Thank you so much for listening today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. To find this episode and links to some of the stuff we talked about today, find us online at twodisableddudes.com or subscribe on iTunes.
We'd like to hear from you and feature your feedback and questions on future podcasts. Be sure to visit us at twodisableddudes.com to find our contact info and connect on social media.
Special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins, who also composed the music.
We'll share a new podcast every other week. We hope you'll listen and share it with a friend. Until next time, keep living with urgency.